I want to talk a little bit about consciousness, or I've been thinking about consciousness, and particularly about consciousness in relation to, well, suffering, I guess. Not just suffering, but pleasures and pains and the disasters of life, really. I suppose this is triggered because I was watching a documentary about the life of Darwin last night, again on TV. It was on the iPlayer. I'll try and leave the link for it in the information box. It was really, really great, well-made documentary about the life of Darwin, which is very well known, but it was a good one. It was a good one, and it had these fantastic, high-quality HD photography, and it was mostly, close-ups of things being killed by other things. Very graphic and it's just astonishing filming, but it really brings it home to you. You know what I mean, about the red in truth and claw thing. And that got me thinking about that, really, because I think it's, in a sense, there was two kinds of existential problems attached to that, for me at least, and it might be peculiar to myself, I don't know. The first is about just suffering itself, suffering in the animal kingdom, and it had lots of these pictures of fish being picked up by kingfishers, or of birds being taken on the wing by eagles, or of snails being smashed by other birds, and a particularly graphic one of what looked like a stoat or a weasel taking down a rabbit and then just kind of chewing it to death. And it was really difficult stuff, but as I say, there was kind of two elements to it, to the existential nightmare of it. One is, just the sheer existence of that kind of level of pain and suffering, which, I don't think can ever really be offset in some sort of strange equation where it's balanced with the amount of pleasure in the world. I don't think that kind of economics, can ever really be satisfying, particularly since it's the pleasures that drive you towards the pains. But anyway, but that aside, there is that level of just sheer unpleasantness, and even the simplest creatures, I'm not convinced an ant entirely feels it, but really simple creatures do feel suffering. There's no doubt about that. There's this really lovely book called Between the Monster and the Saint I've been reading off and on, and there's a passage in there about this guy in his 70s who's remembering one of his formative experiences as a child. And this experience is that he was asked to drown some newborn puppies. And he recounts, what it felt like to hold these little animals, little tiny creatures, under the water in a bucket and feel a little scrabbling claws, scrabbling at his fingers to try and get free. And they're only a few hours old, you know what I mean? So they don't have any sense of they're not, well, you know what I mean by that, I guess. It's just that level of suffering can exist in something as simple as that. And I've been to slaughterhouses, and I know, I've seen those things in action. So I know there is a lot of undoubted pain and suffering in the animal kingdom, really. But the second layer of the existential problem, of course, is that not only do we suffer, but we're also aware of it. As human beings, we are being cast out of the unconscious garden of the animal kingdom into this kind of weird space of awareness where we can kind of see ourselves and see the things around us and articulate in language and surround ourselves with documentaries about it and look forward to it or dread it, all those kind of things ourselves. So we're kind of doubly cursed, if you want to look at it that way. But not only do we have that brief moment of pain while the jaguar bites your jugular, you also have the awareness of it leading up to that moment, presumably through that moment, and for the brief seconds after that moment. So it's all that thing, really. I think, surely nature could have found a better way to do it, is my first response. Maybe it's a series of attractions and repulsions rather than a series of pleasures and pains would have been nice. Something like gravity, or something like, I don't know, something that's easier and less damaging and less experientially positive and negative. And it's just felt like a leaning towards the good stuff and a leaning away from the bad stuff, and it doesn't have any. Anyway, I don't know about that. But either way, the second part of that, the consciousness thing, I think is a bit more of a problem, really, Because it seems to me that this consciousness that we have, and I'm assuming other animals have it to some degree, but we've obviously got it in a more complex way. We have this developed forebrain which seems to do most of that work, and we have all the languages to which to express it, and the cognitive mechanisms to do clever things with it. So we're doing it in a particular way, but it seems to me that that whole consciousness which allows us to be conscious of suffering is also built out of suffering, you know what I mean, and pleasures. I mean, the building blocks, the Lego blocks that have built our awareness are those positive and negative values that we think of as pleasures and pains, aren't they, really, I guess? Can't think what else they could be really. You know, so the fabric of consciousness is the very fabric of, that tissue of evaluations, of felt evaluations, built on the back of a somatosensory system, which gives these negative valencies to the experiences that we have. Yeah, and I don't think you can separate consciousness from that. I mean, there is a kind of dialogue which goes on around, you know, a pure consciousness, as if consciousness is a kind of space, a neutral space, or a kind of brightly lit space into which you can introduce content, some of which might be negative, some of which might be positive. But I don't really buy that. I think consciousness itself is built out of content. You know, I don't buy the whole idea that consciousness is this neutral space that then becomes inhabited with its contents. I mean, I've certainly had experiences myself, and I've read a lot about experiences of that feeling of there being pure consciousness, of just thought without any content. I mean, I've had some fleeting glimpses of that myself, and as I say, there's lots of that in the literature. And meditation, certain meditation, contemplative techniques do lead one to that kind of state. So I've no doubt that it exists, but I don't think it is really a contentless state. I think it's something different. I mean, the analogy that I have for that is like a record player. You know what I mean? I'm thinking old-fashioned record player, like an old dance set record player, something like that. You know, you can turn it on, you can turn the volume up to full, so the whole system is completely alive. And then at a certain point, you know, you drop the needle on the vinyl and the sound generates. But the whole thing, nothing's changed at that point. It's just got some additional content for the needle to scratch itself along. You know, the whole system is working prior to the needle dropping, and that's how I kind of imagine what appear to be content-free contemplative states of consciousness. That you're actually it's conscious the whole time, really. This content being generated by your body, by your biochemistry, by your electrochemical systems in your brain, all that kind of stuff that Thomas Metzinger talks about, I think is in operation there. It's just that the needle hasn't dropped onto the spiral scratch, you know, and that's the only difference, really. But the system itself, even though there's no music playing, is still built out of the same stuff. It's still built out of all of these valencies, all of these evaluations, all of these highly experienced pleasures and pains and propulsions that the pleasures and pains force you on. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this, really, actually. I guess I'm just saying that that the existential problems that a kind of recognition of nature's savagery, and I think it is pretty savage. Firstly, I don't think it's offset by the pleasures. I don't think you can look at nature as a gift and balance it against the curse and do the economics. I don't think that works out. I don't think the balance is right, and I don't think the balance is even viable to do the balancing. But also, I don't think there's any escape from that by claiming, I don't know if anybody is making this claim, but if anybody was to make a claim that you can kind of escape to that by evacuating consciousness so it becomes pure and all of the good stuff and the bad stuff goes, so you enter this detached state of illuminated emptiness. I'm not convinced. I think the illusion of an illuminated emptiness is one that is being generated by the same systems that lead you to tear the throat out of a weaker animal, or to see beauty and have and that beauty be a cue to move towards the thing that you're finding beautiful, and if necessary, push somebody else out of the way. It's a beautiful garden I'm in today. It feels a bit bleak talking about this in such a beautiful garden as this, but there you go.